Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books presents Belonging to Be by Heather Mackinnon, narrated by Cassandra, Myles, and Thom. Chapter 1. B. Someone's coming. That line was muttered by my brother, the alpha of our pack, and his mate Ellie, but no one needed them to say it out loud. We could all feel it. Something was coming, whether we were ready for it or not. We'd been celebrating the solstice with a few friendly packs when this electric feeling began dancing along my skin. It zipped and zapped down my body, making my hair stand on end and my wolf sit up and take notice. Once the sound of the driveway gravel crunching beneath heavy footsteps reached our ears, the festivities ceased, and the mood turned deadly serious. Someone was heading our way, their intentions unknown, and we were all standing out here in our party clothes, completely unprepared. The alphas present gathered in front of the guests, my brother Abraham front and center. I cursed the dress and heels I had on as I took my place behind him and cautiously anticipated what came next. The clearing was absolutely quiet, which should have been difficult for a gathering of more than 100 werewolves, but they managed. I glanced behind me to make sure my sisters and Ellie were back where they belonged. They were all strong, and I'd taught each of them how to fight, but they weren't enforcers like the beefy men surrounding them, and they weren't the beta or second in command like I was. It wasn't their job to protect this pack at all costs. It was mine. I fixed my eyes forward again and fisted my hands. Whatever was coming was closer than ever. That electric feeling was now stinging my flesh, it was so powerful. I'd never felt anything like it before, and that instantly made me suspicious. The crunching footsteps were slow and steady as they made their way up the driveway. I took a deep breath and held it as a dark figure walked around the side of the lodge and into view. The group of alphas in front of me tensed, the air around them cautious and deadly. I knew it would only take the slightest provocation for any one of them to eliminate this threat as quickly as it had appeared. But I also knew my brother. Abraham McCoy was the type of man who asked questions first and kicked ass later. I'll admit, I usually leaned the opposite way, but my job was to follow his lead, and so that's what I did. It was twilight, and the shadows were working against us, but I could still make out the dirty facial features of a man who looked to be in his 30s. He had dark, disheveled hair, and from that far away, I couldn't make out his eye color, but it looked dark too. His clothes were torn in places and filthy in others. My first instinct was that he wasn't a threat. I usually trusted my gut, but when the safety of my family and pack were on the line, I'd take no chances. The strange man came to a stop a few feet in front of the line of alphas. My brother stepped forward, and my feet itched to move with him. "Can I help you, stranger?" Abraham asked. The man smiled, and something in my chest tightened the slightest bit. "I heard your festivities from miles away, and it drew me here. You must be celebrating the solstice." His voice was deep and powerful in an understated way. It made me hang on to every syllable that fell from his lips. "Yes, we are," my brother said, snapping me out of my trance. I shook my head and focused on the stranger again. That electric feeling was as strong as ever, and I fought the urge to rub my bare arms. Even now, goosebumps covered my exposed skin. "It's so good to hear the old traditions are being kept alive by the younger generation," the man said, the smile still stretched across his face. I worked to dissect his words as my eyes traveled along the length of his body, over and over again. He clearly knew about werewolf tradition, but how? Was he a werewolf too? He didn't smell like one. He was still several feet away, but the wind blew from behind him, bringing his scent toward us. It was earthy, like rotting leaves and dirt and fresh grass all at the same time. but it didn't have that undertone I associated with wolves. And what younger generation was he talking about? The gathering consisted of wolves, ages 18 to 70. He couldn't have been older than 35 himself. "What's your name?" Abraham asked, breaking me out of my thoughts again. The strange man chuckled. "Please excuse my poor manners. I am called Will." His laugh, though short, was like a shock to my system. I had to work to hold myself still in its wake. Will. His name was Will. Somehow it felt like that was important. Why or how this stranger would be important to me wasn't clear yet, but I'd trust my instincts on this one. "Will, are you a member of a local pack?" Abraham asked. "Me? Pack? No. I'm afraid I'm on my own." My sister started whispering behind me, but I ignored her. My entire attention, my entire world, was focused on one single point. The dirty, raggedy man in front of me named Will was my only concern right then. "What's your reason for coming here?" my brother asked. Will shrugged as his dark eyes traveled across the line of alphas. After that, they darted around the crowd huddled under the party tent. When they reached me, they paused. It couldn't have been more than a fraction of a second, but it lasted an eternity. His dark eyes, the color of which I still couldn't make out, widened slightly when they locked on mine. I took a short, gasping breath and held it as the entire universe melted away, leaving only the two of us. Just as quickly as he'd laid eyes on me, his gaze flicked away, and I could breathe again. I blew out the breath I'd been holding and did my best to hide the way my chest heaved. I reached up a hand to soothe the ache that was only intensifying in there. Finally, Will spoke again. "I've been traveling for a long time. I was hoping you could offer me some food and accommodations." That suspicion was back and stronger than ever. Was this a lone wolf? If so, we needed to be wary. They were often troublemakers, and we didn't need any more issues in this pack. We were still at the mercy of a serial-killing werewolf who was leaving dead women in our woods. The last thing we needed was another problem to deal with. "Why aren't you part of a pack?" Abraham asked what I'd been wondering. Most wolves lived in packs for protection and a sense of community. Although we might look like humans, we weren't. Every full moon, we were compelled to shift into our wolf form. There was no escaping that. So it wasn't safe for us to live in towns or cities with humans, where there was no room for us to shift into wolves for 12 or so hours every month. Knowing Will wasn't part of a pack just deepened the mystery surrounding him. "I like to wander. No place has held me for any length of time in a very, very long while." Will's eyes flicked around the group again, only landing on me for a split second, but long enough for me to lose my breath again. Abraham crossed his arms over his chest. "That all sounds fine, friend, but I don't believe you're one of us. You might smell a bit like a werewolf, but you don't feel like one. Why is that?" "It's the magic that you feel," Will said, the smile still on his face. "It can be a little disconcerting at first, but I assure you, you'll get used to it with a little bit of time." That's what this was? This buzzing on my skin? It was magic? I hated it. A short series of snaps and cracks caught my attention, and I looked up to find Will had shifted one of his hands into a wolf paw. "See?" he asked. I worked to keep my jaw from falling open, but it wasn't easy. It was incredibly difficult to just shift one part of your body and not the rest. I'd only seen it done a few times, and never been able to pull it off myself. It only served to reinforce the guard I had up regarding this guy. Someone with that kind of power and control could be very dangerous. "If you're a wolf like us, why is there so much magic around you?" Adam, one of the other alphas, asked. "It's not around me. It's in me," Will explained. Okay, then why is there so much magic in you? Abraham asked. I could tell he was losing patience with him if the sound of his voice was anything to go by. The stranger sighed. It is a long story, but to summarize, a very long time ago, I made a deal with a witch. What you see and feel today is because of that. Made a deal with a witch? Why would a werewolf have dealings with a witch? They were notoriously secretive, and most wolves didn't trust them. What would compel this man to make a deal with one? What kind of deal? Abraham asked slowly. I asked her to make me more powerful than I was. She chose to make me a wolf, he said. Those words, the magic, the deal with the witch. You've got to be fucking kidding me. Are you trying to tell me you're the original werewolf? My brother asked. Will smiled wide. Oh, you've heard of me? The entire clearing froze in place as the revelation slowly sank in. Will was the original werewolf, the first of our kind, the very reason we all stood here today, modern-day myths. This was unbelievable, and also highly unlikely. As my brother and the other alphas continued to question Will, I stood back and let the doubt and suspicion build in my head. What were the odds that the original werewolf would show up here, of all places, in the middle of nowhere, North Carolina? It didn't add up, and I had plans to get to the bottom of it before things went too far. You know, I kind of thought he was hot at first, but knowing he's like 1,000,000 years old is such a turnoff. I turned to find Peyton had sidled up next to me to mutter that idiotic statement in my ear. Honestly, can you imagine how wrinkly his balls must be after all that time? She continued with a fake shudder. Truthfully, I wasn't surprised by the crass things that came out of her mouth. I was just tolerating much less of it these days. First of all, we don't even know if he is who he says he is, I said between gritted teeth. Peyton and I had been friends for most of our lives, and that was the main reason I'd put up with so much of her crap for so long. She had a shitty childhood and an even shittier father, and I'd always felt bad for her. While growing up, she'd spent so much time at our house, my mom got in the habit of setting an extra place for her at the dinner table without being asked. When my parents died, and my siblings and I were forced from our home, Peyton came with us to Asheville to start over. I'd always assumed she'd grow out of her bitchier tendencies, but time had actually made her worse. And second of all, why are you thinking about his balls? Peyton rolled her dark eyes. Duh, because he's hot. I just want to be prepared for the wrinkly mess I'll find in his pants when I finally get them off him. Something white-hot surged through my system, and I worked to control my facial expression. Peyton loved nothing more than to get under people's skin, and I couldn't let her know she had gotten under mine. I doubt you'll be getting in his pants, Peyton. And shit, the guy just got here. Think you can give him a minute before you're humping his leg? She sighed and looked toward where the alphas were still talking to Will. Think Abby would get mad if we hooked up? She asked, completely ignoring me, as usual. I did my best to not roll my eyes, but it took a Herculean effort. P, Abraham doesn't care what you do. Quit barking up that tree. Her eyes darted to me, flashing with anger. He just doesn't know what he's missing. He's with Ellie, you know that. They're fated. And you know that's not possible, she said through her teeth. That bitch wasn't born a wolf, so she can't be fated to one. And besides, I have a feeling she won't be around much longer anyway. I scoffed. Doubt it. Peyton shrugged. I guess we'll see. Her gaze darted over my shoulder, and her lips twitched with a smile. Gotta run. I've got something to take care of. I watched her go, hoping that look I'd just seen in her eyes wasn't as manic as it seemed. She'd been trying to break them up since the moment Abraham found Ellie in the woods, bleeding and barely conscious. Ellie had been the 5th victim of this serial-killing werewolf and the only one to survive. I'd been wary of her at first, and in some instances, downright rude and nasty. But that all changed about a week ago. When I'd invited Peyton to our family dinner last Sunday, I'd had no idea what kind of shit show it would turn out to be. P had convinced her police officer brother Paul to dig up sealed court files on Ellie from when she was younger. Peyton thought it would turn Abraham against Ellie, but it had the opposite effect. On him and all of us. Ever since I'd sat there and watched my best friend tear down this woman who was becoming family to me, I'd realized how awful I'd been, and how much needed to change between us. Now that I'd let Ellie into my life, and behind the walls I put up with everyone, I realized she wasn't really so bad, and I'd had no reason to be so terrible to her. I'd been working on repairing that relationship ever since. Peyton, however, had doubled down instead. I'd had to listen to more than one insane rant about how much she hated Ellie and how Abraham belonged to her. I tried to reason with her, but she wasn't hearing it, and I was afraid her obsession with my brother was heading down a dark path. I didn't know how or when, but I had a bad feeling about it. I shook my head and looked around. The party had resumed, although tentatively. As I scanned the crowd, I found Will sitting alone at a table, eating Ms. Elsie's cooking. It seemed like the partygoers were giving him a wide berth, most likely wary of the newcomer. I didn't have the same issue. This man had trespassed on my pack's land, crashed our solstice party, and now he was eating our food. I knew he said he was the original werewolf, but I was about to find out for myself if he really was who he said he was. The others might have been convinced, but he'd have to try a hell of a lot harder than that with me. I was Beatrice McCoy, and I didn't take shit from anybody, not even the original werewolf.
Chapter 2. Will. I can't believe it's the original werewolf. How is he still alive after all this time? I never imagined he'd be so handsome. The soft buzzing voices drifted through the summer air, and I looked up, but all I saw were shadows. Gray, black, white. That basically summed up my existence. Shadows and darkness and the same damn thing. Every day for years and decades and centuries and millennia. Nothing changed, least of all me. I'd been the same for thousands of years. Not a single freckle on my body was any different today than it was on the last day of my old life. Or, I guess you could call it the first day of my new life. But this wasn't any kind of life, so I preferred to think of it as the former. For a long time I tried to find the good in each moment, the true, the pure, the beautiful. But centuries of that became tiring. How many times could you admire the petals of a rose, the buzzing of a honeybee, the crashing of the waves? How many times could you see the same things and still see them instead of looking through them? I didn't know the exact answer, but I knew I was well past that point. Life and beauty had lost their meaning long ago. Now I lived because I had no choice. I breathed because my lungs refused to stop working. My heart pumped blood through my body because it couldn't stop. I ate because I had to, or I'd get too weak to fight off my wolf, and I'd shift and eat the first thing I came upon. My life had become nothing but a reflex. I existed because I had to, but it wasn't a life. I hadn't had one of those since I made a single decision that changed the course of history forever. Can I sit here? I glanced up from my plate, straight into the most remarkable blue eyes I'd ever seen. They were a clear, icy blue that seemed otherworldly, ethereal, celestial. How had I lived so long and never seen a shade quite like that before? Just like when I'd noticed her in the crowd earlier, something in my chest tightened. It was subtle at first, but the longer I stared, the stronger something squeezed inside me. I'd never felt anything like it before. It set off a warning deep inside me I'd never failed to heed. There was something different about this woman. Something more. Hello? I shook my head to break the spell, clearing my throat. I said, "My apologies. Sit." She pursed her lips, but pulled out the chair she'd been holding on to and took a seat. I dug back into my food as I silently anticipated what she had to say. Are you really the original werewolf? What's it like to live so long? Did you actually make a deal with a witch? Have you met Elvis? The list goes on, and I'd heard it all. What the hell are you doing here? I whipped my head up from my plate, eyes wide. That I had not been expecting. Excuse me? She leaned closer, the smell of sage infiltrating my senses. You heard me. What the hell are you doing here? If you even are who you say you are, which I'm still not convinced, what would bring you here? To this state, this town, this pack? I don't buy it, and I want to know what you're really doing here. I pressed my lips together before they could curl into a smile. I'd done more of that in the past 20 minutes than I had in the past 20 years. In my life, there wasn't much to smile about. In fact, the only reason I'd pasted on the fake grin earlier was so I'd appear less threatening. You think I'm lying? She shrugged a delicate shoulder and leaned back in her chair. I don't know. I don't know anything about you, and that's a problem. I set my fork down and crossed my arms over my chest. Her eyes danced along my biceps before they met mine with a flash of anger. Why would I lie? Who knows? You could be a spy from another pack. You could be a rogue wolf trying to assassinate our alpha and take over. You could be a fucking space explorer from another galaxy for all I know. The corner of my lip twitched. Wouldn't I need a spaceship? She narrowed her eyes at me. Okay, so you're probably not an alien, but all the other theories are still on the table, and you haven't answered my question. What are you doing here? I already said. I heard your festivities. But that wasn't the whole truth. I'd been on my way here, to this exact place for weeks. I just hadn't known it at the time. That's all. You heard a party and decided to crash it? I shrugged. Basically. I don't believe you. Sorry to hear that. She growled softly, which I found amusing. If you're the original werewolf, shouldn't you be in Europe somewhere? Can't a guy travel? What was the name of the witch who spelled you? Ima. Where did it happen? In a little village in present-day Germany. How long ago? About 5,000 years, give or take a century. Where have you been since then? Everywhere. What have you been doing all this time? Waiting. That last answer brought us both to a stop. I had been waiting. Waiting to live, waiting to die, waiting for my existence to have meaning again. How do I know I can trust you? She finally asked. How can I let you around my pack knowing so little about you? They seemed like genuine questions, and not like the test she'd given me earlier. Like she was trying to find a reason to trust me and hadn't found it just yet. Your pack? I dodged her question, because the honest answer wasn't the one she wanted to hear. That she had no business trusting me, no business letting me into their lives. I'd done this to them after all. I should be shunned, not welcomed. Yes, this is my pack. I'm the beta. Now that was interesting. A female beta. Her eyes narrowed again. I won the position fairly. My lips twitched again. I've no doubt you did. She sat there, her hypnotic eyes boring into me as I wondered what she saw. I hadn't bathed in weeks, hadn't had a proper meal or a bed to sleep in all that time either. I was a poor excuse for a man in that instant, and for the first time in a long time, I found myself caring about that. Don't make me regret this, Will. The sound of my name from her lips sent a bolt of energy through my body. Another thing I wasn't used to feeling. Regret what? She continued to watch me, her fingers gripping the edge of the table. Don't make me regret letting you in. Why did that sound like it meant more than it really did? Like she wasn't just letting me into her pack, but into her life. Surely that wasn't what she meant. Why would she want to have anything to do with me? I'll just be staying the night. She shrugged and stood gracefully from her seat. I knew then she meant what she'd said about winning the position of beta honestly. She had the natural eloquence of a fighter, someone that was intrinsically in tune with every part of her body. I traced my eyes along the length of her, wondering what she hid beneath her tight dress. She leaned over the table, near enough for me to inhale her scent again. My chest squeezed tighter the closer she came. "Stay for however long you like. Just don't fuck with my pack." I did my best to smother another grin, so she'd take my next words seriously. "I have no intention of harming anyone. I hadn't fought or injured another wolf in centuries. I had no inclination to start now." She stared me down again as I tried to figure out if I'd ever seen that exact shade of blue before. A flower, perhaps? The Aegean Sea in the summer? Maybe the delicate wings of a butterfly. "I didn't catch your name," I said, breaking the spell between us. "It's B." "Like the letter?" She shook her head. "Like Beatrice." "Beautiful," I muttered, not sure whether I was talking about the name or the woman. Maybe both. It fit, after all. Finally, she looked away and stood up straight. "As long as we're clear, I'll leave you to your fans." I frowned in her direction until she nodded toward the group of people gathered nearby. Their faces were tentative, eyes hopeful, and I knew exactly what was in store for me next. A barrage of inane questions I'd answered thousands of times in the past. After the interesting and refreshing conversation I just had with B, the thought of talking to anyone else felt like a true chore. But I suppose it was the least I could do for a hot meal and a bed for the night. Besides, I was in a better mood now. I felt better than I had in decades, at least. And the reason for that was walking away from me in a skin-tight dress that left enough to the imagination that I knew I'd be up the rest of the night thinking about it. But that, too, was a small price to pay.
B. Green, like a hunter or forest or something. A green so dark it was hard to tell what color it was from far away. Once I'd gotten close enough, I'd been able to see the lighter streaks and flecks of gold in his eyes. Eyes I hadn't been able to stop thinking about since I'd walked away from him hours ago. I tried not to, but for the rest of the party, I'd kept Will in my sight. I could tell myself it was because I was still suspicious of him, but it wouldn't be the whole truth. I may not have wanted to admit it out loud, but I tried to make a habit of being honest with myself. Will was gorgeous, even with the layer of dirt covering him. He was fascinating, mysterious, with a set of dark green eyes that I could spend days staring into. It was no wonder I couldn't stop thinking about him, or sleep for that matter. The party had been over for hours, our guests all gone, and my work done for the night, but I couldn't settle down. I'd tried a glass of moonshine. I'd tried a hot bath. Hell, I'd even tried some meditation techniques Ellie taught me, but nothing was helping. Now, my next course of action was ice cream, and if that couldn't solve my problem, I knew nothing would. "Rainbow sherbet, I'm counting on you," I mumbled into my bowl before scooping a big bite into my mouth. Just as the cold ice cream began to melt on my tongue, a door slammed upstairs, and I knew I wouldn't be finding any peace in this late-night snack. Loud footsteps came thundering down the stairs, and I sighed before pushing my bowl aside. Abby should have added pack babysitter to the list of duties for his beta. It sure seemed like I did an awful lot of that. I sat there, waiting for whoever it was, and when they finally turned the corner, I was shocked. Peyton was the very last person I'd expected to come bursting into the kitchen. She'd been banned from the lodge after she'd poisoned Ellie's cat a few weeks ago. I'd half-heartedly stood up for her after that transgression because it was just a cat, but there'd been no talking to Abraham about it. Peyton had hurt his mate's pet, and there was no excuse for that in his mind. Truthfully, it was a lot farther than I'd ever thought Peyton would go to get to Abraham. She seemed to be full of surprises lately, and none of them were good. Like, why was she in the lodge in the middle of the night, her face red and her eyes watery? "Peyton, what are you doing in here?" She stopped short in the middle of the kitchen and turned to me like she'd just realized I was there. Her pale face pinched with a sneer. Just seeing things clearly for the first time in a long time.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?